All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's session. We'll be continuing from where we stopped last last session. That's on Monday. We're continuing from choosing your colors. We stopped at um the how to choose colors for your design project. What are the tips? What are the hints? What are some principles you can follow to choose colors for the design project? And we stopped particularly at color contrast, right? So a vital point for when you choose your primary color is the color contrast. Standard for color contrast ratio between the foreground and the background has been given by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So this contrast is a standard so that whatever colors you are using, if you're planning to use two or more colors in your design, it is there to ensure that those two colors can work, right? Not when one color is overpowering the other or when you can't see a text because of the background color. Right? So it gives you standards for the ratio between a color and its background. So this guideline states a recommended contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1 for normal text and 3:1 for large text. Right. So for example, in this picture here, where you see this contrast checker, you're still going to look at the website itself. So now you have the foreground color, which is a blue color, and you have a background color of white. So this is simply saying I want to have a blue text or a blue element in a background of white. Right. So now I am bringing the two colors I'm using, my background color and my foreground color. Foreground means what is being focused on. So I put those two colors, hex code of those two colors in my contrast checker, and I got my contrast ratio. So from this result, the contrast ratio is 8.59:1, which is very, very high compared to the recommended contrast ratio of at least 4.1. So it hits the mark and surpassed it. So you can use these two colors together, basically. That's what this is trying to tell us. But if we're to mix, per se, we have a shade of blue and a shade of brown. So now I want to put blue in a background of brown, and I sit in this my contrast checker, and I'm getting probably 2.1:1. That it's lower than our standard. So the standard ratio, the contrast ratio is 3:1 for large text. Let's say a large text like my choose your color wisely. This is a large text. It's my header element. But for smaller text, like your paragraph text here, the contrast ratio, the standard or the least is 4.5:1. Right? So just know these two standards. If you don't have to even cram it, because most of the contrast checkers that you're going to use, once you put in both colors that you want to use in your design, it's going to tell you whether it passed or it failed the test. Right? So like this one, the result says pass, pass. Right? And it also give you a kind of visual example of what these two colors would look like if you use it. So here the text is blue and the background is white. Okay. So another hint or another tip, we talked about this before, is to follow the 60, 30, and 10 rule, where your 60% of your design should be split between your primary, your secondary, and your accent color. So 60% of your design should be your primary color. 30% should be your secondary color and 10% your accent colors. So you can learn to split your design colors in that way to give it a certain a sense of hierarchy, a sense of importance to some specific colors. Right? So now accent colors, now you're using only 10% of accent colors. So whenever someone sees that accent colors, it's going to contrast very well and it will be very prominent and they can easily see it. So remember that accent colors are usually there to give information. So they should be seen. So generally, when we are designing or when we are choosing colors for our design, we should follow the 60/30 and 10 rule, right? And another one is to understand your audience. Like I've said, understand the audience, know the people you are designing for. Remember, we have talked about the psychology of colors, how different colors would evoke different emotions, or how different colors would appeal to different age groups. So even different generations. So know your audience, know what they want. If you're building something that's more masculine or geared towards the more masculine, the male gender, you look for colors that would appeal to them. Something feminine, same thing. If you're building a children application, you'd also do the same thing. Look for playful colors. All right. So understand your audience and their needs so that you can make successful user color palette. Right. And the last one is preferably you can use photos to create your palette. Yeah, sometimes it helps to bring inspiration from nature. Remember when we talked about principles of colors, we said colors are usually inspired from nature. When we talk about green, the color green and how we usually use it for eco-friendly applications, we use it for to signify health. All right, it's easy to signify nature. Why? Is because we associate it with the concept of trees, leaves, and plants. Right, so use your environment. So in the sense here, you can, if you have let's say you have an application you want to build and you have seen some pictures or mood boards, something on Pinterest that you see, you can say that it's giving you the vibe or it's giving you the inclination where you want your design to be going towards. You can simply take that picture and extract the palette from it. So it's also something you can do to help you create palette, right? Now, some tools for building UI palettes. You have the Adobe Color, you have Colors, you have Color Hunt, you have Color Mind, you have the Contrast Checker, and you have the Canva Color Palette Generator. So let's briefly look at the colors. Hold on. Okay, so this colors is simply an application that you can easily create color palette as fast as possible. It's like a color palette generator. It helps you to create color palettes. So now you have identified your primary color, the color of interest, like the main color you want in your design. You're looking for other colors that work well with it, right? So you can now come to this this application, this tool. You can also I will here the slide, you would also look at other tools that you can use. So you can decide to just click on start the generator. So this will just create a palette for you randomly, just a random array of palettes, right? So now if you're looking at this color from what they just presented to us, like randomly, they gave us a monochromatic scheme. So this is also still bringing us back to what we did in the last class. Monochromatic scheme where your color scheme is just one color but different shades and tones of it, right? So now it's giving me a monochromatic scheme. Let's say I do not want this. I don't want this. So I can simply click on my space bar to generate another color palette. So it's it's um it's user friendly. You just keep clicking. I don't like this, I don't like this. Just keep. And one thing about these colors is that all the color palettes they are giving to you is going to respect one of the schemes, the color schemes that we have touched or that we have talked about, be it monochromatic, be it triadic or tetradic. So it's going to ensure that it has that balance and harmony. And if you are using it in your design, it's going to work well for you. So we can either decide to choose one color here. So how to use this tool? Simple. You can, let's say I like this brown. I like this brown, but I do not like the rest. So I can simply decide to click on to lock brown. So me locking brown means I'm going to change other colors, but I want the brown to remain here. So I can click on my space bar again and other changes. But no, this does not work. But I like this carrot orange. It seems nice. So I lock this one. Okay. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. No. So that's just how you can generate palettes like that. Right. So this is for when probably you do not have any color in mind and you just want to see options and to inspire you and your creativity. So yeah, also has other tools. So now we are in the palette generator. So this is just generating palettes randomly, right? Then there's also you can also explore palettes. You also have image picker, right? So now remember that the last tip I gave you is use photos to create your palette. So let's say you have a photo. It doesn't have to be a photo of a digital application. It doesn't have to be an interface. It can just simply be photos of the environment. Yeah. This is a photo of the sunset. Okay. So and the color tool would just pick colors from there and create a palette for you. Right. So now this is something that's existing in nature. So it already has this natural balance and harmony that can only exist in nature. So colors that you'd be selecting from here are most likely would already be balanced, right? So you just maybe make some few changes and all. So you can decide you can move all these color pickers here. You can say I want to move this one. I want it to go to the sun or something close. Alright, so it changed over here. I want to move this blue. Okay, maybe to a darker blue, and it went over here. This is black. Okay, so it just depends on the vibe you're going for, the personality of your brand and all that. So Color Tool also has a contrast checker. It has a contrast checker in it. So remember, I talked about the contrast checker, checking the contrast between your foreground and your background, right? So background, you know what a background is, just something let's say it's something behind you, then foreground is you being in the particular position that you are. Now you have text color and background color. So these are two colors now. Now let's say I click let's try the blue and brown I talked about. So this is blue. Let me pick a dark blue. Right? Then a dark brown. Let's slide this here. Right. Yeah. So now this is blue and black. Okay, blue and brown rather. So even from looking at it, like you don't without using the contrast checker, you know that you're already straining your eyes. See this. I had to zoom for us to actually see it. All right. So even without doing the whole mathematics, you should already know there's a problem here. So now if you go to our results, you're going to see that our contrast is 1.43. 1.43, which is very poor. They're already giving you the results. They're very poor. Remembering that our contrast for small text is 3:1 and large text is 4.5. So it should be higher than 4.5 or it should be higher than 3. Right? So when we are choosing colors, we should have this contrast in mind. Right? Contrast in mind, ensure that it's something that is visible. So if I move this and probably make this a bit lighter, right? So it's for small text, it's not the best, but it's good. For large text, it's better. Let me go a little bit lighter. All right, yes, no, lighter. So now I don't have to zoom into it too much for you to see what is in it. And obviously the contrast is very good, 7.9, 7.89. Right, so that's how you use the contrast checker tool. Right. So it also has the palette visualizer tool. So this happens when you have decided on the color that you want to work with. Let's say have decided you have gotten a palette, you have gotten your palette, and now you want to kind of visualize how it's going to look like without heading into Figma yet. So you have the color, but you want to see how it looks like. Let's say you thought of a very strange color combination, green and purple. Okay, green and purple is a very it's not sometimes it's not a very common color combination, and you have checked the contrast. It's fair, but you want to see how it's going to look. So you come to this palette visualizer to see how it might look. So this is your palette here. You can change the colors. I can click on this red. Let me make it green, green, green. Okay, so this is green. And let me change this to purple. Yeah, okay. Now so this is how it's looking like. So for a graphic design, you have it's tailored. Remember, this is a universal tool. It's not just tailored to UI UX designers. You have the graphic designers here. You have the UI UX designers here. So this is a website or a hero page. So we are seeing some things here, but we are seeing that if I look at this, I don't think this the contrast is okay because I could barely see it. I had to zoom in to see it. Same thing with this one. So he's going to be telling us he's going to tell us some things about the design in general. So now if I want to use this very light blue, yeah, I would probably not use it for text because I can see that it's not very accessible. It's not very obvious. I might decide to use it for only shapes, or I can decide to come here and increase it, make it darker. Okay, so now it's now more obvious. I can see it easily. Okay, so these are the different ways we can use the color tool. So you come here, this is a dashboard, simple dashboard with the different colors. So this is obviously not how it would look in your design, but it gives you an idea of how mixing all these colors together would look like. Right? So yeah, this is the colors tool. Right. So now you also have the contrast checkout tool. So this is just for checking contrast in particular. So the color tool has a contrast checker embedded in it, but it's not a contrast checker tool in general. But this website it's also attached in the link, gives you the web accessibility checker for colors, for color contrast. So you have the foreground and you have the background. Okay. You have your color picker. So let's try the green, no blue, okay, blue and brown. Again, let's see what we're going to get something different. Right. Okay. So now the contrast ratio also 1.35 ratio 1. So it's for normal text, fill, for large text, fill, for graphical objects and user interface components, fill. Right. So like I said, like I talked about in the blue, the light blue you just saw in the palette visualizer. So there's some colors that would work for graphical objects, that would work for shapes and all, since it's not meant to be read, it's just meant to be seen. So some colors might work for it, but for text and normal text, it might not. That's why this contrast checker is giving you information for all three. Going to give you the test whether it's passed or failed for a normal text, for a large text, or for graphical object. So even from looking at this, it's straining my eyes already. So it's a very, very, very bad color combination. Yeah, and you should probably not be using them together as background and foreground. Right. So let me move this so that my eyes will not. Okay. Now with blue and white, I see pass, pass, pass. Right. So that is it for the color tool. So you can also look at other colors here. We also have our color in Figma paletting. Let me quickly show that. Um, Okay, so now this is Figma now. This is the wireframe we created. We are going to add colors to this subsequently, but now let's just look at how the color tool works here. So now when you click on a shape or an element or anything, you're going to see their property, and from the property, you're going to see the fill. So fill has to do with the color, right? So now this is the color. Let's say this is a version of the color wheel. Version of the color wheel. Remember the primary colors I talked about: the red, green, and blue. That's RGB. RGB as the primary colors. That when you mix them together to get your secondary colors, right? So you can see them here, right? You can see it all here. This is your okay. So now, if you look at this is your color picker. You use this to select a color. Let's say you want to the color you want to copy. Just simply use the color picker to pick the color you're looking for. So now in the panel here, you can choose what theme or what mode you would be using. So I talked about this. You have the RGB scheme, you have the hex code. So this hex code just gives you a series of 6 digits number that you use. It's unique for every single color, right? The hex code is unique for every single color. So every color would have its own hex code. So you have the CSS, there's the cascading style sheet used for coding. You have the HSL, hue, saturation, and lightness, and you have the HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness. So I talked about this in our last class, about hue, about saturation. I talked about brightness. So hue now is simply purity of your color, or the your pure color alone. So let me set this to HSB. All right. So now you're going to see that if I move this panel, the only thing that is changing is this first field here. So this is hue, this is saturation, and this is brightness. So this is opacity. Opacity is just is here. You adjust opacity by sliding this slider here. But the three main components of this color tool here is this depending on what color mode that you are in. So I'm in HSB now. So meaning this is hue, this is saturation, and this is brightness. Okay. So brightness means that this color, this brown color currently, this gray color rather, is at 85% brightness. So if I want to darken it a little, I might go 50. So 50 is lower, meaning I want it to be a little less brighter. So 50 and I click enter, it becomes a little darker. Okay. I can make it 90. It's going to be a lot lighter. So I'll make this 70 and leave it there. So for hue now, remember I said hue is your pure color. Now, if you look at the color wheel here or the color slider here, once I start moving this around, the hue starts moving, the hue starts changing, right? Not the saturation, not the brightness, but the hue, because this is simply the pure color. Right, so now let's say so now if you're looking for a color red, red is a hue of 0. Hue of 0 or hue of 360 will give you a color red. So let me move this down here. Okay, moving this down here. So that is the saturation. So I hope we're all following. So now let's see. Let me go again. So now if I move this slider, I am adjusting the hue. That is the color itself. I'm switching between whether am I going yellow, am I going blue, am I going green, am I going purple. The color itself, that's where hue matters. If I move this slider, I move it horizontally like this, right? I'm adjusting the saturation. Right? So if I move it vertically like this, I'm adjusting the brightness. Okay? So just get familiar with all this, with the tools and all that. So like I was saying before, hue of 360 would give you red. Hue of 0 and 360. If I make this 0, it will be red. If I make it 360, it's going to be red. A hue of 120, and make this 120. Um, okay, my appearance, move this to 100, sorry. So a hue of 120 should give me green. Okay. Then a hue of 240 should give me blue. Right. So remember, this is a color wheel. So we'll visualize a circle and the angles of the circle. So angle 0 and angle 360 would always give you red. Angle of 120 would always give you green, and 240 would always give you blue. So this it helps when you are trying to manipulate color. So now this is a pure blue. Okay, let me make this 100 or rather 50. So this is pure blue. Okay, because it is set at the hue of 240, the saturation of 100%, and brightness of 50. So I kept the brightness at the minimum. It's not too bright and it's not too dark. It's at the middle. So this is a pure blue color. So when I want to start adjusting this color, sorry, and I want to make it lighter, I can just simply come here to the brightness and make it like 70. It already gave me a brighter color. I want to make this 80. Okay. Now I want to adjust the saturation. Yeah. I feel like it's a little bit too blue. Then I'm going to make it 60. Right? So now it's now looking like a different kind of blue, a different shade of blue, but it is still blue and it is still at 240. Right? So that is how we use this color tool on Figma. Right? So now going back to what we have for today's class. Okay. Now continuing from where we stopped, we're going to talk about typography and layout. Learn how to, we have talked about colors and how to choose colors and how to use color tools on Figma, how to use some outside color tools like coolers and contrast checkers, right? Now let's go into typography. So because all this I'm talking about all this is because now we have created our wireframe and want to start making it visually attractive. But we don't want to go in there blind. We want to know if I'm using a particular color. I want to be sure that this is the color that will be evoking the emotion I want in my users. This is the color that I want to go with. I don't want to go into it blind, right? So the same thing with typography now. So we're going to try to understand typography, the types of typography, elements, the principles, and how to ensure that we are using good typography, right? Or in our design. So typography easily is simply concerned with text. Right? It's the art and technique of arranging text to be both visually appealing and easy to read. Right? So, two concepts, visually appealing and easy to read. So now in typography in UI design, remember it's design. So we're not just talking about text like text on our notebook or text on a novel. We're talking about something that is communicating with users, an interface. So You want it to be visually appealing, right? So we've already added colors. We're now using typography to cement or to complement the color. So it should be visually appealing also and easy to read at the same time. So good typography isn't just about creating a fancy font, it's about creating a visual hierarchy, ensuring readability and setting the tone for your brand. It involves font style, appearance, and structure, which aims to elicit certain emotions and convey specific messages. In short, typography is what brings the text to life. It's what brings your text to life. So why is typography important? Why should we stress about typography? Why do we have to do a whole slide on typography? Okay, because this is because of one, typography builds brand recognition. So good typography would enhance your website's personality, and your user will subconsciously begin to associate the typeface featured on your site with your brand. All right. So now, there are some logos that are simply simply text, right? Some logos are made as simply text. This mobile phone, Techno logo, has a Techno word, TECNO. It's simply text, but it's identified as their logo. So if you see that word anywhere, you're not going to associate that word or that text now with a sentence or a normal text. You're going to associate it with the brand itself, right? So typography is that important. The same thing with color and how I talked about when you think of um green. So there's a green that you're going to see, you're going to think of WhatsApp. There's a blue you're going to see, you're going to think of Facebook because these colors have been associated closely with those brands. So typography also influences decision making. So eye-catching type is much more persuasive than weak fonts that don't reinforce the message of the text. Right? So even in this slide, when I was creating this slide, hierarchy, persuasion, the using the bold tool to make some type stand out and leaving the others. So this creates a level of hierarchy. This tells you what your eye should be catching. This it reinforces the message that you're trying to pass. So typography also holds the attention of the users. So typography could be the one difference between someone staying on your website for 1 minute or for half an hour. If something is readable, it's visually appealing, they would be more persuaded to wait it out and take the whole information provided to them. But if it's something that stresses their eyes and it's not eye-catching, they would get bored of it and leave, right? Now, elements of typography. What are the elements of typography? Now we have this discussion or this confusion concerning fonts and typeface. So after typography, we all know that typography is about text, the art of making text visually appealing and easy to read. Now we have fonts and we have typeface. Most of us are familiar with what a font is. If I say name one font, everybody here would name a lot of fonts, but I'm very sure that most of us we're going to name what we're going to name are typefaces, not fonts. Right. So now the difference, a typeface is a design style that comprises a variety of characters of varying sizes and weight, whereas font is a graphical representation of a text character. Simply, a typeface is a family of related fonts, while font refers to the weight, width, and styles that constitute a typeface. So now if I ask people what in their Google document, when you're creating your document, what fonts do you use? Most of us would go, I used Inter, I use New Times Roman, I use Montserrat, I use Roboto. But what we are calling now, this Montserrat, the Roboto, the Lato, the New Times Roman, the Calibri, they are not fonts, they are typefaces. So now as designers, we should already start being careful of how we say things. Because what you say tells people what you know. Right? So Helvetica, Calibri, New Times Roman is not a font, it's a typeface. So if you have been saying that, just correct it now. But it's not that deep. It's not that deep, but just a knowledge that you should hold tight, or you should just hold so you not be confused at um the next stages. Now, the difference is what is then a font? If most of what you have been calling fonts are typefaces, so a font is now a particular or a specific member of a typeface. Right. So now you have New Times Roman. We're all familiar with New Times Roman from Microsoft Word. So New Times Roman is a typeface, right? So and this New Times Roman, you have the bold version, you have the italic version, you have the thin, you have the light. So in this text here, I have a typeface. My typeface here is in bold, right? And the typeface I'm using here is Lato, right? So while this paragraph text here is Lato medium, this is Lato bold. So when we start specifically stating the thickness or the weight of our typefaces, we're not talking about fonts. So fonts are are specific, the specific width, the specific weight, and specific styles that constitute a typeface. So categories of typefaces, we can list the normal typefaces. The normal typefaces we know: Calibri, Helvetica, um, Lato, and all that, but they all fall into different categories, and these categories would inform their use in your design project. So we have the serif typefaces. They are called serifs, right? So they are identified by the extra mark at the end of the letters. So all this extra mark here at the end of the letters is what denotes a serif typefaces. So think of serif and think of, let's say, tail, right? So when normal text has a tail attached to it, when you see a font that has a tail attached to it, it would most probably belong to a serif typeface. Okay, so these small strokes and elements give the serif fonts an air of tradition, history, authority, and integrity. It's a classic style, and most the New Times Roman that we use in Microsoft Word is a serif font. You go back and you look at the New Times Roman fonts, you would see the tails attached to the characters. So tails meaning you have your R. This is your normal R without any extra ruffles. Your R should just be a straight line and another straight diagonal line, or curve rather. But this a serif would have tails added to it. So this extra thing here, this here, this here. So all these things outlined in blue are your tails. So they're added to this text to give it that element of tradition and history, right? So these are serif fonts. They're usually good for headers and bold designs. So now you have the sans serif. So remember serif, I told you to liken serif, the word serif, to a tail. So sans means something that is without. Sans basically means without. So a sans serif simply suggests without serif. So I'm talking about a text that doesn't have tails attached to it. So this design, this font that is used in this particular slide doesn't have tails attached to it. It's just a very simple strokes and dashes. In this website here, this font used here is just a sans serif. It's belonging to a sans serif typeface. Right? So as a result, because they do not have these extra strokes and dashes and um complexities, they are very simple, they are modern, and they are very legible. So they are cleaner and simple, like Arial, Helvetica, Inter. For example, the fonts used in this slide is sans serif. So the fonts being used here is Lato. So these fonts are known for their straightforward appearance, making them ideal for modern and minimalistic designs. Most of the UI you're going to be creating, your body font, your body paragraphs, you would have to use sans serif typefaces because it's the best, especially for paragraphs that you have a lot of content in it. We also employ serif, but not as much as the sans serif. Sans serif is the most employed typefaces in UI design. So another one is the decorative typefaces. So simply decorative, ornamental, they have flair, they are unique, they are very shouty, they catch your eye easily. Right? So this from the very concept of it, they should catch your eye easily. They are unique. Right? So your paragraph text cannot be decorative typefaces because it's meant to be unique. It's meant to be for one thing, probably your header. So in this design here, you're going to see the decorative typeface, just one decorative typeface in this whole design. And it's shouty, it's the very first thing you are seeing. But for readable content, imagine this text as a long paragraph. You would strain your eyes. So the text is more aesthetic than readable. You would likely see them more in brand names, logos, and short titles, but they are not usually used for body copies because of their lack of readability. That's the decorative typefaces. Another typefaces you have are the script typefaces. So these ones are simply they mimic traditional handwriting or calligraphy. Yeah, they are all the ones with flares and cursive typefaces. They have flowing connections between letters with varying line widths. They add elegance, sophistication, and playfulness to text. So, like I said, personality of your brand. Let's say you're building a fashion brand, and you want to give this vibe of elegance and sophistication. You're already using purple as purple is a color for sophistication. And you're looking for a typeface for your header text. You can go to script because now you know what script typefaces do. You know how what image they give your users, right? So they are very decorative. They add elegance and sophistication, and we can use them in our designs. That is what we are trying to convey. So now, the last one we want to talk about today is the monospace typeface, also known as the fixed page, fixed width, or non-proportional typeface. So this is a font whose characters and letters occupy the same amount of horizontal space. So they have the same width, same horizontal space. So like you said, the I takes up the same horizontal space as M, right? They take the same horizontal space. So you see these ones in, let's say, all right. Okay, so we stopped at the monospace typeface. So it's edgy, it's used for, you can use it for space, lines on space, on, um, my saying, sci-fi. So that's the vibe that this monospace typefaces give us. Okay? So depending on what personality your brand is trying to present, or what personality you are trying to channel, you can decide on what typeface you would be using. Okay, so another element of design, or element of typography rather, is the font family. So font family is simply the same thing as typeface. Okay, so I'm just giving you different words that people can throw at you so you do not get lost in what they mean. So same thing as typefaces. A font family is a group of related fonts. Okay, so now you have clash display. Clash display is your font family or is your typeface. So now the fonts under clash display, you're going to have clash display thin, clash display light, the regular, the medium, the semi-bold, and the bold. Okay. So overall, a typeface is the overall collection, while a font refers to the specific styles within that design. Like I said again, the font is the specific style within a typeface, which varies in weight and size. For example, Clash Display is a typeface and Clash Display Medium is a font. Okay, so I hope you have gotten that distinction. So now, key principles of typography. What are the principles that guide us in choosing our typography, apart from the personality we want to evoke or how we feel also, or what is appealing to us? What exactly should we be looking for in typography to decide on which one we are using for our project? Now, a key principle is readability and legibility. Okay, so as much as you want something to be visually appealing, want it to be eye catchy, it should also be readable and it should be legible because UI design, we're not just it's not just decorative or for visuals. You're communicating is an interface. So you're trying to build an interface. Interface is simply a wall between two people. Okay? So they should be able to communicate. So it doesn't make sense you're trying to communicate, but I can't read you or I can't see you. So focus on readability and legibility. So legibility refers to how easy it is to distinguish individual letters and characters. Okay? So like when we use the blue text on the brown background, so we had problems with legibility. So that's not a it's not exactly a legibility problem, but we had problems with legibility because we could not distinguish the individual text, letters, and characters because of the contrast, color contrast there. Now, readability is about how easy it is to read and understand a block of text. So legibility is talking about individual characters. Let's say I'm seeing Legibily. So me able to differentiate this text means the text is legible. So so if you look at some handwriting, there are some people that write their G in a very weird way or their B in a very weird way, and might not be able to identify what word, what letter, or what character is this, or what character this is. Yeah, that's a problem with legibility. But readability is now about how easy it is to read and understand a block of text. So you're talking about sentences, a full block of text. Can you read it? So that's why I mentioned that the decorative typefaces, though it's very pretty and eye-catching and we use it for headers, it's not so to be used for paragraphs and body text because it's not readable. It's going to strain your eyes a lot. So to ensure both readability and legibility, choose a font that's clear and easy to read at various sizes. And ensure that there is enough contrast between text and the background. Like I said, contrast again. Right? Now, font selection. Choosing the right font is crucial for your designs. You can consider these factors when choosing your font. First of all, the purpose. Is the font suitable for your design project? For example, a formal font for a financial app or a playful font for a children's game. Okay? So the same thing, you're designing for your users, similar to what we did in the colors, we're also doing it here for the font. So if you are building an application tailored to children, you want to use something playful, something simple and playful that you can use a lot of colors and walk around so it appeals to your audience. So for a financial application, you should probably look for something edgy, something formal and minimalistic without too many ruffles. So purpose would determine what font you're selecting. Then also consistency. Limit your font choices to one or two families to maintain a cohesive design. Now I'm going to say this thing now, but in every design you're creating, two font families is more than enough. Just two. Two. One if possible. One is enough. Then two, if you want to add, probably you want to add style and you want to add some you want to add more design elements or more complexity to your designs. But two, do not go above two. If I see designs that is using three different typefaces, I'm going to grade you that. I'm going to grade you like that. So, for example, you have a design and you're seeing Arial fonts, Helvetica fonts, and Roboto fonts. That design has already failed in the level in consistency because it's too much. There's no need. There's no need for you to be using more than two fonts in a particular design. Okay, so just limit your font choices to one if possible. Most times when you're working with mobile applications, that's um your mobile phones, stick to one if possible. Then if you're working with a website where you have to talk about the header, eye-catching content and copies, you can go with two. You can get a decorative font for your headers and use your normal font for your body and other paragraphs. Okay. So popular fonts for UI designs include sans serif font. So like I said, sans serif is what we normally use in the UI design, like Arial, Helvetica, and Roboto, known for their clean lines and simplicity. So there's also Poppins, there's also Lato, there's also Playfair Display. So go through your Figma, look at what fonts are available there, test them out and see how, remember, readability and legibility, that's the very first focus in your design. Now you've selected your font. We're now going to start looking at the font specific characteristics. So here we're talking about font size and hierarchy. The hierarchy is arranging text based on the importance of information. This can be achieved through font size, weight, and style. So it's as simple as me making my font size and hierarchy. This is a header now, so I made it bigger and I made it bold. So the font size is bigger, and the font weight has more font weight than the paragraph text here. Okay, so I'm already placing a level of hierarchy and telling anybody looking at this that this is the header. This is the most important. This is the most important element in this screen or in this page. So first thing, so if you are trying to create your hierarchy, first things, your headings. Headings are usually the largest and boldest text used for titles and key sections. So you have your headings here. You have your subheadings. So subheadings are usually smaller than headings but larger than the body text. They are used to separate content. You can see an example of a subheading here. You also have your body text. This is just simply your paragraph text and your regular content. So usually now in your design, in your UI design, your body text should preferably stick to sans serif, right? Sans serif, especially if it's an application, a web app or a mobile app. If you're talking about websites and all those fancy things, you might implement a serif in it, but you have to be careful and you have to know your onions with typography to select one that is readable and legible. So, but for your heading text now, this is where you can do the magic and test other fonts other typefaces rather. Okay. So we also have the captions and the labels. So captions and labels are smaller than the body text and used for annotations or additional information. So now in any design you're creating, these are the levels of hierarchy of your typography. The four of them. You have your heading, your subheading, your body text, and your labels. Usually there would be different sizes in decreasing order of sizes and also probably decreasing order of weight. Okay, this is done to show that level of importance. So now when we are choosing font sizes for our designs, it's best to specify this font sizes, this font. So now I've decided, okay, I want to use Roboto for my design. So for my headings now, I'm going to make all my headings will be 64 pixels. So now I've written it down. So remember, design should always be consistent. So UI UX design is a bit like mathematics because at some point you have to use your calculator, right? So now I've specified my headings to be 64 pixels. When I say my subheadings, I can say subheadings for 32 pixels. My body text, 16 pixels. Then my caption or labels, 10 pixels. So labels and captions are usually really small. They are quite small. So where you can see labels and captions, let's say in your mobile application, where you have your navigation and you see your navigation icons. Let me say you have your navigation icon and you see a small text where they write home, or you see a small text where they write profile. So that text now is a label text because it's labeling that icon. And there's no need for it to be big or loud or shouty because it's not competing with your design. So it's usually very small. It could be 10, it could be 12, 10 or 12 pixels. But usually advised to not to go below 10 pixels in UI design. Right? So no matter what you're trying to create, do not go below 10 or 8, depending if it's mobile or web. So using consistent font sizes helps users to understand the relationship between different sections of your UI design. So now I've specified 64 for all my headers. So all my headers will be 64 pixels. I've specified 32 for my subheadings. All my subheadings will be 32 pixels. Same thing with my body and my labels. So now anywhere someone sees my body content or they see my subheadings, it will be easy for them to understand what this implies, what this means, or at what how important is this information to me. Mhm. So now that we're done with that, can start talking about the typeface specific factors such as your line height. So I'm going to also show us how to manipulate this on Figma, but let's first of all let's understand the concept. So line height can also be known as it's also known as leading. It is adjusting the space between all characters in a line vertically. So your line height is simply the space between lines, the vertical space between different lines of text. Now, if you look at this text on the right here, you can see the space between them. This is a line. This is one line. This is another line. This is another line. This is another line. Okay. So now the line height in this text is 42 pixels. So you can see that it is spaced out. The paragraph is spaced out. But the line height in this is 36 pixels. So it's looking very tight and compressed. So we should always ensure that your text has a proper line height so it doesn't feel crowded or overly spaced. If the line height is too low, lines of text can overlap or feel compressed. If it is too high, the text can seem disjointed and hard to follow. Right? So most of the time, when you select a font on Figma or whatever software you are using, it already comes with its pre-made line height. Okay, and if you're lucky, you might not have to adjust to this. But there are some fonts that have not really been, they're not really perfect, and you might have to touch it a little for it to give you that readability that you're looking for, legibility you're looking for. That's your line height. Another terminology is your letter spacing, also known as your tracking. So tracking, this is the space between lines of text, known as adjusting the spaces between lines of text. So adjusting letter spacing can make text easier to read and create a visual desired effect. Our tighter letter spacing can produce a compact modern look, while wider spacing can give a more open and airy feel. So now line spacing. So remember in line height, we are more focused on the the line below us, because we're talking about height, the height of a particular line. So the height of a line will determine the space between that line and the line under it. That's line height. But in letter spacing, it's talking about the space a letter occupies, or a text occupies. So we're talking about when the text starts shifting towards to collapsing towards each other rather. So now or expanding. So this letter spacing here is minus 1 pixel. So this is fine. You can see your text fine, but this is minus 4 pixels. Then it starts getting confusing and compact. You can't see or differentiate the words anymore in an incorrect letter spacing or tracking rather. Another terminology is kerning. Kerning is simply adjusting the space between individual characters in a piece of text. So kerning is a bit similar to the letter spacing, but instead of a paragraph, kerning is applied to a particular word, a particular text. So you can use kerning to adjust different visual inconsistencies such as headlines and titles. So kerning usually use kerning in titles like capital letter, capital letter. So let's say I write something in all caps. I write probably Apple. So usually it might be it feel a little bit too tight, and I might want to expand the the text to give it more room to breathe. So this is me adjusting the kerning of the text, or this is the act of kerning rather. Also, branding and logos. For branding and logos, kerning is crucial to ensure the text has a consistent and balanced appearance. Now, choosing the right typefaces for your website. How do we choose the typefaces for our website? We've talked about all the factors, the type of typefaces, the the principles that applies to them, elements, and all that. So, how do we choose? First of all, think about personality. I've said this already. How do you want your users to feel when they enter your website? Reflect on tone. Consider how the font harmonizes with your tone, the tone of your message. So imagine you're creating a banking application and you're saying, trust us with your money, and you're using a childish font or this bubbly font that is very playful. It's not reflecting the tone of your message. Your font, your typography, and your message, they are not aligning. So if you want to convey serious or important information, use a less stylized or decorative font that is clearly legible and will limit distraction. So your fonts, your typeface, and your tone should align. Another one is function over aesthetics. Yes, we want a pretty typeface. We want it to be visually attractive, but function first. Like I said, UX over UI. If you can get both, better. So when deciding what typefaces to include in your interface, set the style, the aesthetic, and voice aside and reflect on whether the font is legible, readable, and accessible. Hmm? And also consider performance and screen. Consider performance and screen. So sometimes you can see a typeface. So all these fonts now, they do not just come from nowhere. They were created by people. They were created by people. Some are open source, some you have to buy them. Okay. So now when you're choosing your typeface, you have to consider the performance. You have to consider whether this typeface you are choosing is web browser friendly. So sometimes you might see a niche typeface. That's something that has been created by maybe a small business owner or something, but it's very pretty and it's really nice, and you want to use it for your design. So by the time you use it for your design and it has been developed, because it's not web browser friendly, somebody from somewhere would access that particular website, but the fonts that will be seen on their browser would be different, right? Because their browser does not recognize that new font that you used. So you're just going to use the default font for web browsers. Okay, so there are some commonly used fonts that are web browser friendly that can be used without any issues on any website or any web application. So always consider performance when choosing your typeface. Right? Ensure that they are web browser friendly, ensure that they are accessible. So using a library such as Google Fonts. So Google Fonts is a library where you can get typefaces, download them, use them, mark them, and do anything you want to do with Google Fonts. There are also other websites and softwares that helps us to choose the right typefaces for our website. So also, you also test your typography on different devices and screen sizes to ensure that it looks everywhere. Okay. So now you're using this font size or this typography for the web. In the mobile responsive, does it respond well? Okay. Does it respond? Those are questions that you should be asking yourself and considering when choosing the typefaces for your website. Mm. So that's brings us to spacing. But before we go to spacing, let me show us some yeah, Google Fonts. So this is Google Fonts. You can decide to search for a particular font. Let's search for a font, let's say Poppins. So now most of the fonts on Google Fonts are they are web friendly, so they are accessible anywhere. So you should not have this should not be worried when using them. So, okay, I'm going to change this to English. All right. Okay, so this is Poppins. This is what Poppins look like. It's a very round font and very playful. Okay, so from looking at it now, if you look closely, it doesn't have does it have all those tails? No, it doesn't. So obviously this is a sans serif. This is a sans serif. So let me show us Times New Roman. Is it New Times Roman? Okay. Okay, this is Newsreader. This is not the one I'm looking for, but yeah. If you look here, if you look closely, you're going to see all details I was talking about. So all these are details. This is details I was talking about. So this is a serif font. Mhm. It's just a simple calligraphic font. Remember, they are usually made to resemble or mimic the handwriting. So yeah. Now, if we go into Figma and we select the text. So remember, this is typography, so we are dealing with text. So I select the text one. I want to write a text. So I write search. So let's say okay. So now by default, based on the last um typeface I used in this design, if you go to your properties panel under typography, you're going to see the typeface. This is DN Sans. So obviously, if you look at it closely, no tails, no tails, no tails. This is a sans serif. Okay. You want to change the font size, the font weight rather. So you have the light, you have the regular, you have the medium, you have the bold, you have your semi-bold and bold. Right. So now this is a font family. They are all the same typeface, but different font weight. Okay. So different font weight. So now, like I said before, line height, the line height and the letter spacing. So even in Figma, you can see that it's already labeled for you. So this is the line height and this is the letter spacing. Let me see, I create a body of text. Let me do it quickly. Mm, okay. So now I want to adjust the width of this. I want to make it a paragraph. So I want you to notice something that happened. Let me Control Z undo. So now when I went by default, when you're elongating your text, it's just going to keep going straight. That's because the layout is just sense it has been set to auto width, so automatic width. It's going to take the width of whatever text that you put in it. But the width is automatic. Then this is auto height and this is fixed size. So auto height now means that I'm going to select the height of my text. Let me continue this. Now you're seeing that it's respecting the width I gave it. So instead of going straight in a straight line, going to infinity, it's going to what is going down. So now to explain the line height and letter spacing, let's say I select all this, Control A to select everything here. And now I go to letter spacing and I make it -4. Okay. So you can see what happened. The text kind of came together. They came together. So I reduced the line spacing. Now I'm going to make this -20. So let's see what happens. That's why it's a line height that it's too much or too little can pose a problem. So let me make this -10, -12 rather. I want to shrink some. So that is what the letter spacing does rather. Okay. So now by default it will be set to 0 and your line height will be auto. So I'm finding out by automatically my line height is 21. If I want to increase my line height, I want to increase my line height to essentially increase the space between lines on your text. So let's say I make this, this is what happens. If I make it, let's say 10, this is what happens. Okay. So while the line height is fixing your space issues vertically, the letter spacing is fixing your space issues horizontally. That is what they both do. That is the leading and the kenning and all that. Okay. So now we are done. We are done with this the introduction to typography. So let's go into spacing before we are done. Then we'll be done for today's session. Okay. So now principle of spacing. I'll be introducing us to the 4-point system. Spacing. So now spacing in UI design simply refers to empty areas between elements in a layout. So it's simply space, empty areas. So this includes space between text, images, buttons, and other UI components. Proper spacing helps to create a visual hierarchy, making it easier for users to understand and interact with the contents on a page. Like I said, UI design is very mathematical. Everything informs the design in UI design, or everything informs the users in the UI design. So now if you look at this spacing in this form field, so you have your sign in, they have a space. Then you have your username, you have a space. Then you have your input field where you're going to type in your username. Then you have a space. Then you have your password, and there's a space. So this is just simply any empty area I can see. That is the space, right? So now using space, we created a kind of hierarchy. When you look at this form field, you will know that input element here, this input element here, I'm supposed to put in my username. And this input element here, I'm supposed to put in my password. And how did this information come to me? Is simply via spacing. Because now the closest element or the closest label to this text field, this box here, this text box here is the username. So let's say the spacing here is probably 4 pixels. But the spacing between this element and password is probably, let's say, 8 pixels. So the same thing here, the space between this signing and the username would probably be 32 pixels or 16 pixels. So using spacing, we created a sense of visual hierarchy, letting you know what belongs where. Now, understanding the 4-point spacing system. The 4-point spacing system is simply a system of using elements or spacing in multiples of 4 to define spacing between elements, ensuring uniformity and alignment. Now, like I've been talking about 16 pixels, 4 pixels, 8 pixels. So now the 4-point system, now we are talking about space. We are trying to establish the spacing we are using in our design. We want to make it consistent. Okay. So the 4-point system helps us do that. Is the most used or the most common spacing system used universally, the 4-point and the 8-point spacing system. So the 4-point system just simply tells you that the space between two items can either be 4 pixels. If it's not 4 pixels, it's 8 pixels. If it's not 8 pixels, it's 12 pixels. If not 12 pixels, it's 16 pixels. So in multiples of 4. 8-point system, 8 pixels, 16 pixels, 32 pixels, 64 pixels, multiples of 8. So that is what the 4-point system tells us. So how to create our 4-point system? First of all, simply define your base unit. The base unit in the 4-point system is 4 pixels. So all spacing values must be multiples of this base unit. For example, you can use 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 12 pixels, and 16 pixels, and so on. Usually, I prefer to use 16, 8, the 8 pixel. I usually go 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 12 pixels, 16 pixels. Then instead of 20 pixels, I jump to 24. So it depends on you and your design. So usually when you're creating your spacing system, you have to actually create it. Don't just have it in your head. Create a system. Create, like, let's just imagine you're creating manuals for your design, creating a system for your design. We're going to enter and we're going to get more familiar with design systems eventually. But for now, at this stage, just understand that you're going to have a base unit. You have to have your base unit, and all your spacings in your design will be multiples of this base unit. Okay. Now this simply says that now I'm saying a space between this and this. So this space between this and this cannot be 15 because 15 is not among my 4-point system spaces. Either if it's not 15, it should be 16. If it's not 16, it should be 20. If it's not 20, it should be 24. So I'm moving in multiples of 4 to define my spacing system. So after I've defined my baseline or my base unit, I go to step 2 to apply consistent margin and padding. This is where you start putting in your grid in your design to ensure that you're putting you're getting adequate space or the gap between your elements are respecting that 4-point system. So now margin is the space outside an element. It creates a gap between the element and other elements around it. Why padding is the space inside an element. It creates a gap between the element's content and its border. So margin is a space, padding is a space, but where they are, give them different meanings and different inferences and different uses. So margins and paddings are essential for separating elements and creating breathing room. So you can use your base units to set consistent margins and paddings around your elements. So usually for your mobile design system, your margin is usually 16 pixels. So 16, yes, it's a multiple of 4. We are still following the 4-point base system. Okay. So now that you have created your 4-point base system, use it to create visual hierarchy. So because you have a 4-point system doesn't mean all your spaces should just be 4. So if I want to put a space between two items, I should put a space of 4 pixels. Depending on the hierarchy, like we talked about before, depending on what belongs where, how things are grouped, what is most important on a page, we're going to use our space system to identify that, to send that message. Okay. So we're going to use different spacing values for different levels of importance, like I've said. For example, you can use 16 pixel spacing between major sections and 8 pixel spacing between related elements within a section. This helps users easily distinguish between primary and secondary content. Now, for spacing between on a button, so to easily differentiate a padding from margin. So now let's see. In this button now, you can see 72 pixels here, 72 pixels here, 16 pixels here, 16 pixels here. So all this space, you have your button text inside here. All this space around this text is the padding. You have the top padding, the bottom padding, the left padding, and the right padding. So now remember, padding is the space between is the space inside an element, is inside. The margin is outside the element. So the margin of this button now is now the space between this button and the as the end of this diagram or end of this picture here. That is the margin of this button. So now in summary, you have talked about colors, we've talked about typography, we've talked about spacing. So these are the design elements that we should familiarize ourselves with when we want to start visual design. Hmm. To build our color palette, we first try to understand color theory and recognize the psychological impact that colors have on users around the world. Recognizing that a UI color palette is like a designer's paint box and it contains the set of colors that you want to use to design your interface with. Color psychology is a powerful tool for creating positive user experience. It's a cherry on the cake to make a product genuinely shine and delight users. So typography is often overlooked because we think it's just text, but it's a crucial component of user interface design. So we have to choose clear fonts and sizes for readability and use font weight and spacing to show importance. And lastly, we have understood that spacing makes design neat and easy to read. The 4-point system simply uses spacing in multiples of four, and that is the one that is the industry standard. The 4-point system or the 8-point system is the industry standard of spacing. This 4-point system is it can be applied outside of spacing, so you can apply it to your typography. Yeah, so when I say when I'm choosing font sizes and I'm choosing my font size for my header text is 64. So if you remember when I chose 64, 64 is a multiples of 4. You can divide 64 by 4. I also chose 32. 32 is a multiples of 4. 16 is a multiples of 4. So when you start seeing discrepancies, when I start saying things like 14 or 17, right? So even though I've not said it explicitly, I've actually been following the 4-point system from the very beginning of this class. From everything we have been doing on Figma, right? So it's the system that guides us when using spacing, when using typography in our design, when using design elements generally in our design. So questions and answers. Questions. Questions, questions, please. Are there any questions or confusion? Questions? So are there any questions? You can simply raise up your hand or drop your question in the chat section. So before we end this class, I want to show us how we can incorporate the spacing, that 4-point system, or the spacing in our designs rather. How we can incorporate it in our designs. So we have talked about the feel, the color, how to use it in Figma. We've talked about typography, where to go to and how to adjust it and all that. So now spacing, how do we actually implement the spacing? How do I ensure that, let's say now that I'm trying to put my search typography here, how am I sure that the space between my icon and my search is in multiples of 4? Right? So remember, it's that specific. It is that specific that the space between every single element on your design should be in multiples of 4. Okay. So now, there is a keyboard shortcut that you can use. Simply click on Alt, select an item, click on Alt, Then navigate to the item you want to check the space. Okay. Let me zoom in very well. Now I'm currently selecting Alt, and it's telling me that the space between my icon and my search 8. So we can see it here. We can see it here. The space between my icon and my search is 8 pixels, which is actually following the 4-point system, so I am safe. All right, so same thing here. If we select our search bar component, I click on Alt and I navigate my mouse to the banner that we created. I'm seeing is this is 16 from here. 16, we can see it here, 16 pixels. So it's still respecting the 4-point grid system. Okay. So I think when I was designing this, I probably had that in mind. So this is also 16. This is also 16. 16. So this is 14 now. But now we are seeing there's a discrepancy here and there's a mistake. It's not supposed to be. Okay. So now usually now this is where you show visual hierarchy. Okay. This is where we show visual hierarchy. So now remember that the space between this and this is, okay, let me name this now. Let me use the text here. Okay, pixels are units, they're like they are points units. So let me see. Like if I zoom into my Figma now, I don't know if you can see these boxes here. These boxes are simply units of space, units of containment. That's pixel. So one of these boxes here is 1 pixel. I don't know if you can see those boxes. One of those boxes is 1 pixel. So when I say that the space between two elements is 8 pixels, it means that there is 8 boxes between those elements, right? So this will also show us grid. Oh, hold on, I'm trying to do this something now. Okay. So now let's say I put this items for sale stuff here. I put it here. I just put it in the middle here. So sometimes when someone comes here, they can be confused. The items for sale, is it these items here, or is it this banner, this up one here? Because it is not clear what parts or what group it is belonging to. So there's no clear visual hierarchy in this design here. So why? Let's look at the spacing. So the space between this and this is 9, and the space between this and this is 10, which is very similar. So we can use spacing to create a clear visual hierarchy in this design. So what we're going to do now is going to move this 9, 10. So now the spacing is 15. I'm going to move this 1 more pixel down. So to move, I'm just simply clicking up. I'm using the arrow. So one arrow down would take me 1 pixel down. When I check now, the spacing between items for sale and this picture here is 16 pixels, right? So now, and the spacing between items for sale and this item here is 3 pixels. I'm going to make it 4 or 8 rather. I think 4 works well. Right now, so now if someone comes to this design now and you ask them what are the items for sale, because of the hierarchy, because of the different space between these different elements, it's easy for you to say that items for sale are the ones here because they are closer, they are grouped together. So this is how we can start using space to show clear levels of hierarchy in our elements. Right? So even when I zoom out of the design, when looking at the items for sale, it's too far from this banner for you to say it is linked to the banner. So we would link it to what is closest to it. That's how we use space to show that hierarchy. Okay. So now sometimes there is this system. Let me duplicate this. Control D. I'm going to duplicate this and I would. Mhm. Okay, now I have a frame. So this is a frame. So remember now, I want you to recognize that this bounding border here is not just a rectangle behind this. This is a frame. How I know it's a frame is because like once I click on this iPhone 13 mini and I move this around, everything inside that frame moves with it. Everything moves with it. Okay. So if it's a frame, it's different. It's not just a rectangle. It's not just a background. It's a frame, right? So when we start creating designs, the first things you get is your frame, like I've said before. So you can also prototype it because it's a frame. When you click on prototype, it takes you to the okay, not this. Okay. So while that is loading, I want to show us how to add a grid system to our design. So now I'm going to go back to design. Then when you go to your properties panel, like always, you have your position, your layout, your appearance, your fill, your stroke, your effect, your layout guide, and your export. So what I want to create now is my layout guide. So now your layout, once you see your layout guide, you can see that the grid now and now have is now very highlighted. So now the person was asking me about pixels. So these are pixels, pixels, pixels. Now the size of your grid now is 8 pixels. So one grid is containing 8 pixels. One grid is containing 8 pixels. So if I go to one grid, if I zoom into one grid, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's 8 pixels, 8 times 8 pixels. Now I do not want to create just a grid. I want to create a column grid. So I make this, instead of grid, I'm going to select columns. So now it has given me columns now. My count is 5. Count simply means the number of number of columns you can see. Then the spacing between these columns are called your gutters. All this spacing are called your gutters. So I can change the color of the grid if I choose to. So I want more of a blue, I want something blue. I want this to be lighter, so I can make this 5%. Okay, it's too light. I can make this 7%. Okay, so and the type of grid currently is in stretch. So stretch means that I want 5 columns. So this 5 columns is going to stretch across my frame. So if I don't want it to stretch across my frame, I want it to just go to the left. I click on left. So now these are the 5 columns and it's just to the left. So now that it's not stretching, the columns now has its own weight. So I can make this weight now. I can make it let's say 60. Okay, so now I made it 16. But this is not the settings we want to use. We don't want left, we don't want right, we don't want center. We want to use stretch. So I want my grid system. Remember, we are creating a spacing system. I want my grid system to stretch across my whole frame. Then my margin, remember the margin we talked about? That's the space outside my system. I want my margin to be 16 pixels. Now this margin now, if you can see here, this space was not here before. Okay. So now then you see, then you get your gutter. So that is the spacing system. Next week we are going to look at this in more details. Look at this in more details. We're going to talk about more about Figma, and we're going to create the system, high fidelity design, right? So yeah, so that rounds off today's class. So since there are no questions, I'll see you all next week. Have a nice weekend and God bless.